advances at the time, now Orbital ATK, to do this fantastic mission. So following it along, building it up, preparing it for all these operations has been very exciting for me. So if you'd cue up the video of the spacecraft in orbit, once we come off the top of the rocket, all the fun for us spacecraft folks begin. About 44 minutes after launch, we'll separate from the launch vehicle, deploy our solar arrays, and be nice and happy and power positive. We'll then check out the functions of the spacecraft over about a 5-day period, turn on the instrument about 6 to 8 days, get first light about 8 days after we're launched. Then we'll do a series of propulsive maneuvers and fly by the moon, which will be a tremendously exciting day on May 16th, eventually getting into this very special orbit, this P/2 lunar resonant orbit on about June 12th. So really looking forward to the exciting part where we'll operate the spacecraft from our Dulles, Virginia Mission Operations Center and continuing on into very many years or decades, if George Ricker has his way, we'll just keep going and getting fantastic science. So really glad to be here. Go Tess. And I'll pass it over to Omar. Tell us a little about launch services.
Thank you so much. And first, I want to apologize to members of the media for being a little late. I forgot how to put on a tie and a suit, and it just put me behind. No, seriously, we just got done with our launch readiness review, and all went well. It's a testament to the thoroughness that we go through in reviewing these launch vehicles. And first, I want to thank the members of the Launch Services Program and of SpaceX for helping us get through the certification of the Falcon full thrust vehicle. It's been a little over 2 years since we've flown on the Falcon 9, and that was a version 1.1 out of Annenberg. It was a Jason mission. And since that time, we've been working hand in hand with SpaceX to get to the certification to be able to fly the type of mission that Tess is, and it's a very important science mission for the agency. It's not large, but it's a powerful stepping stone towards getting what the James Webb Space Telescope needs to go do. So again, thanks to all those folks. So a little bit about the processing and what's gone on. The launch vehicle got here about a month ago or more. The folks have been preparing it along with the rest of the missions that they've been working on. We had a mission dress rehearsal last Monday, which went well. It got us accustomed to working with the SpaceX team in the range in this mode of a launch vehicle. We had a flight readiness review on Tuesday, along with a static fire testing of the Falcon 9 rocket on Wednesday. Like I said, we finished our launch readiness review this morning, and here we are. The spacecraft and the launch vehicle are ready to go. The sequence of events that you'll see in the next day and a half are sometime after midnight. The weather cooperates with us. We'll be able to roll the launch vehicle out to the pad, connect the vehicle up to its commodities, raise the vehicle up to the vertical, and turn on the spacecraft, start loading the pressure vessels. And hopefully by T-minus 3 hours, my launch team will be on station. The SpaceX team comes in just about then, and they start getting ready for their LOX load, which will occur at T-minus 70 minutes. We are aiming for a 6:32 in the evening launch, 6:32:07, say, and we have a 30-second window to be able to get that mission off tomorrow. So everything's looking good. Weather tells me they're going to be good. We have to see this front pass through tonight, but all is well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Hans.
Thank you. Thanks, Omar. Yeah, SpaceX is excited to launch Tess, a really big mission for us. And since you just mentioned Jason, I was trying to figure out how many rockets we launched after Jason, between Jason and Tess, and I think it's about 30, more than 30, and certainly that we launched more between Jason and Tess than we launched before Jason. That's pretty, amazes me myself, actually. All right, 6:32, as everybody said, tomorrow night. We will go into a translunar orbit. It will be a 2-burn main mission with a additional burn to dispose the spacecraft. The first burn is pretty much like a geotransfer burn. That's how it's going to look from here, due east, more or less. Not quite. Then we're going to coast for about 40 minutes, is what I remember. Have a second burn, and then shortly thereafter, we're going to deploy the spacecraft and hand the keys over to you. The first stage will perform a drone ship landing, as it has done many times before. In fact, this is going to be, if it goes well, this is our 24th overall recovery of a booster, and I think the 13th or 14th drone ship landing. 24 in total, 23 in total so far. We have done 11 land landings so far, 12 drone ship landings, so it's the 13th. Okay, those numbers need to add up. Let's see. It's actually our 8th mission this year. We ramped up the number of missions significantly, and it pays out in having a more routine operation, and in being more confident that things will work, and I'm really excited about tomorrow night, and think that we are ready to go. Pending weather. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Mike.
Well, I'm just thankful that we're not launching tonight. I'll just say that, because we've got a pretty gusty winds outside right now, strong winds out of the south, bringing all the warm temperatures up from Miami. And that's all ahead of this very strong frontal boundary that's moving through. If we can have the satellite video up. You can see where it's moving through the Big Bend area of Florida right now, slowly making its way to central Florida. We're expecting showers to start in central Florida probably around 3 p.m. in a couple hours or so. And looks like thunderstorm activity probably around 6 p.m. And that's when our severe threat begins, probably 6 to about 10 p.m. It looks like that's going to go trucking on through, and hopefully by midnight, showers have diminished again, and we're ready to roll out. So looking at the forecast, next slide. For the primary day, again, we're looking at that front just to push on through. It should be well to our south, out of the peninsula. Winds die off fairly quickly. On the back side of that, they'll be west-northwesterly, 20 to 25 miles an hour at 200 feet. So there's a 20% chance of violation. I don't think you'll see much in the way of clouds at all tomorrow, so it should be good viewing conditions as long as those winds do drop off and stay below liftoff constraints. If for some reason we need to go to this backup day, next slide, you can see that conditions stay fantastic, might develop a little bit upper level cirrus, but less than a 10% chance of violation, as winds are definitely be dropped off to just about nothing as high pressure settles overhead. So looking very, very good for this backup day, and I think we got a real good shot at it tomorrow too, as long as that front continues to push through and we get rolled out on time. Thank you.
And thank you, Mike. And we'll now begin by taking questions. We'll start here in the room. We also do have a phone bridge and Ask NASA questions. Now, if you could raise your hand, state your name and affiliation, and to whom you're directing your question. And we'll start right here in the front of the room.
Chris Kephart with NASA Spaceflight. So for Hans, can you talk a little bit about what this high priority science mission means for SpaceX in terms of being chosen as the launch provider for it, and for the launch outlook for the rest of the month? Can one of you talk about the opportunities that you have through April, and how, from the NASA side of this, with launch service providers, this works with Insight. If I understand correctly, there's a date that you have to be off the ground by with Tess before having to stand down for Insight. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I want to use actually the opportunity to thank NASA, our customer, for the confidence in having us launch this really important mission. So that is something that I should definitely note. Also, at the same token, I want to thank the Air Force and the FAA to support us for this mission, and then of course our integration team at SpaceX and LSP getting ready for this launch. Tess is, I want to say it has a special relevance for SpaceX in the sense that we want humanity to become a multiplanetary species, and this is about planets and other systems. So it's probably further down the road, but at the end of the day, that is the road. That might be a roadmap in the I think we said distant future. So it's super exciting that we look for planets and other systems and try to figure out where humanity might one day, who knows, go there. So from that perspective, absolutely very important mission for us.
So from my side, first, thanks, Hans. It's great to have a launch vehicle provider who's as excited about the science as we are. So thank you. So when it comes to backup launch opportunities, so every day we have a launch opportunity from the 16th until April 26th. Except for the 20th, right? And the 20th is only because it happens a little bit after midnight. So on the 20th, that calendar day, there is no launch opportunity. So 16th through the 26th. They start to move further and further into the evening. So the first few are around 6:30. Then you start to get to 7, 8 o'clock. They go through midnight and start to come into the early morning. If we don't launch by the 26th, the Launch Services Program has priority to put on the Insight mission in their launch window. And so they need to stand down on our mission temporarily. So that ends on the 26th. That'll be our last opportunity for April. And then we're going to continue to talk with them about, depending on when Insight launches, when the next opportunity for us would be. I think the first Insight launch date is May 5th. If I have that right? Yeah, so May 5th. So again, if they launch earlier in their window, that provides us an opportunity to get back on the pad earlier. Their window goes all the way through June 9th, I believe, so that could push us a little further if they need more time. So they have a very specific planetary window they need to meet, so they are a high priority for the agency. For us, we can launch multiple times in any month. So if we get pushed to May, we get pushed to June, we have opportunities.
And we'll now go to the phone bridge. We have James Dean from Florida Today.
Hi, thanks so much. Hans, could you confirm, is this the last new Block 4 Falcon that you plan to launch?
Yes, that is correct. It's the last new, not flight-proven yet, Block 4 is what you mean. We will continue flying flight-proven Block 4 stage 1s or boosters for a couple more times, but we will then switch over to Block 5.
And could you possibly just highlight a few of the key changes you've made to Block 5, just generally, and then how you expect them to improve reusability?
Yeah, I think Block 5 basically summarizes all what we learned on reusability. Whenever we recover a booster and then it goes through a refurbishment, we find things that are giving us basically lessons for the next block. And in this case, we trying to summarize all these lessons learned into a booster that then is able to fly and be recovered and fly again multiple times without a lot of refurbishment. And that's basically the key thing on Block 5 is a reliability upgrade that combines reliability and reusability.
Is there any one or two examples you could give of those types of lessons learned?
Off the top of my head, materials on the heat shield down at the engine bays, what I would probably cite, but there's a lot of details here that are very technical.
Okay, thanks. And finally, for Hans or Omar, how much margin do you have in your schedule if this severe weather should linger a bit longer than hoped to roll out and have an attempt tomorrow?
So the nominal rollout's at midnight, but we probably have 3 or 4 hours to be able to move things, to be able to adjust and make it.
Hi, Ken Kramer for Rocket STEM and Northeast Astronomy Forum. For Hans and Omar. Okay, so this is a new orbit, never before used science orbit, P2 resonant. So I'm wondering if there's any special requirements, any special challenges for the SpaceX Falcon 9 to achieve this orbit. And did you need to use the Block 3 and Block 4? Earlier versions were not capable of this.
You want to go first?
Yeah. So Ken, it's not an unusual orbit. It's not the typical one that SpaceX is flying. But if I were to bring my analyst here in the room, they'll say there's nothing special about this orbit. We've used highly elliptical orbits before for other instruments. It's not one that we used all the time, but for this particular mission, it applies, and the physics behind it are not all that misunderstood. It's well known what it'll do.
For us, it's a little bit different in the way that it looks like a geo-transfer orbit, but going further out to the moon. And the targeting basically changes every day. That's something that we had to deal with here. It's not a big deal. And in terms of performance, it's also not challenging Falcon 9.
Yeah, and I think the key from our side, too, is that, once you get tipped off the top of that Falcon, we now need to rely on our own propulsion system. So the orbital team has had the challenge of making sure that we can get into that final orbit. We have to do apogee burns and perigee burns for 4 or 5 orbits after we get tipped off the top to make sure that we get into the right configuration so we can do the lunar flyby that Robert mentioned before. And it's that lunar flyby timing that's going to put us into that orbit. So there's challenges both on the SpaceX side and then on our side. So.
Thank you. And we'll go to Marcia Dunn on the third row.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. How close are you coming to the moon on May 16th during that flyby? And could a few more people talk about the excitement of going out there to find new worlds and what might lie out there?
Yeah, the lunar encounter is a few thousand kilometers above the surface. And as Jeff was mentioning, Hans will put us into this highly elliptical, almost geo-transfer-like orbit, but there'll be a number of propulsive maneuvers that we make before we target exactly on that flyby. So it's a fairly routine flyby. It'll be exciting, Dave, but it's a routine gravitational assist from the moon.
Someone some excitement about going out to explore and find new worlds.
I'll start. So NASA obviously is very interested in exploring life here on Earth, but also exploring the universe and searching for life elsewhere. And this is a key mission that's going to enable us to look at stars that are nearby and help us understand whether or not they are, if there's planets around them, identify and survey the planets, and then leverage other missions to help us understand whether or not they have the ingredients and capability to support life. So it is very exciting. It's something that I think by human nature, we look for exploration and adventure, and this is an opportunity to see what's next.
Yeah, it's funny. I worked at NASA headquarters back in the 80s, and NASA as a whole was kind of reticent to even talk about the search for life outside the solar system, because the thought that we could ever develop tools was, like a far-out science fiction dream. So I think that's what's changed a lot, is that the tools have been in place now for the last 20 years to start to understand the size of the planets, where they are, what they might be composed of, and kind of leading on that continuum to where you might actually at some point identify, hey, there could be life on that planet. We found the signature in the atmosphere or something like that. So I think that's what's been exciting just in our lifetimes, is that we've gone from having the potential to never know the answer to the question to where we now think we're on a path to get there.
Yeah, and I would say it's also very exciting for us at Orbital ATK. I mentioned earlier, this is our 31st mission where we've delivered a science spacecraft for NASA. So it's very exciting to do the engineering, the nuts and bolts, but really to tie into exoplanet science and to look for things outside astrophysics, heliophysics is just, it makes doing the job of engineering even more exciting for us.
Stephen Young with Astronomy Now and Spaceflight Now for Hans or Omar. Could you tell us a little bit about the requirements you have for the weather, for the rollout, and what sort of things you might be concerned about tonight in terms of the actual weather conditions?
So our main concern for both the launch vehicle and the spacecraft with this type of weather, obviously exposure to the moisture, lightning, that kind of thing. The vehicle is pretty robust, and we can launch in winds approximating 30 knots. So it's it's not going to be crazy at launch time. From what Mike said, it's going to be fairly benign. I mean, he went to he said clouds might be or ground winds might trip us, but we're nowhere near those limits in his predicts.
In terms of the rollout tonight?
In terms of the rollout, obviously we can't have lightning in the area while the folks are trying to roll the vehicle out because of safety exposures. But and they're going to be using some lifts out there to do some of the work, so some of that might be limited if the wind is a little bit too strong, and that's up to the operator. Hans?
Yeah, I might be delayed by an hour or two, but I trust Mike with his forecast.
MikeWallaceSpace.com. This one is probably Hans. Do you guys plan to try to recover the actual payload fairing on this flight? Are there any plans for that?
Good question. Yes, excellent. So we will try to recover the fairings, but there is no catching the fairing like we tried on the West Coast. Basically, we have a boat there that will basically inspect them and pick them up. Same parachutes as the last attempt. And I'm pretty confident we're going to make some progress towards final recovery here.
And now we'll go to the phone bridge. I believe we have Stephen Clark.
Hi, Stephen Clark from Spaceflight Now. Thanks for taking a couple of questions. I think first, probably for Robert or Jeff, does one of you remember offhand the distance from the moon during the lunar flyby next month? And for Hans, looking ahead to the first Block 5 mission, has that vehicle been delivered to Florida yet, that booster? And how did the testing go in McGregor? Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Stephen. Good to talk to you again. I answered a question a little bit earlier. It's a few thousands of kilometers, but I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. Goddard Space Flight Center Flight Dynamics has worked out all those intricate details, but I have confidence that we've got it targeted just right.
And the test cameras will not be on, so don't expect photographs of the moon as we fly by.
No moon selfie for this one.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, regarding Block 5 is here. We're all excited about that. We had a good test campaign in Texas. I believe it was faster than we ever had on new block upgrades, but it certainly takes time to get everything worked out and tested on a block upgrade here. And so I'm looking forward to that launch in early May.
We'll go to Bill Harwood.
Yeah, hi, Bill Harwood, CBS News. Two quick ones for Hans, and they're just nuts and bolts. I noticed the RSS, of course, is slowly vanishing before our eyes at 39A. Is the hinge which is still there, is that coming down too, or are we seeing it basically how it's going to be down the road?
I don't know that, unfortunately.
Okay.
I don't know that.
And a second one for you, or maybe it's for Mike. Liftoff winds. I realize it depends on the angle that it's coming in, but can you give me a ballpark what the constraints are since you listed it in your forecast?
I think the earlier number, 30 miles an hour, is the right number. Yeah, it's high enough to not worry about it the entire time. Yeah.
I'll go to the front of the room.
Hi, Thaddeus Cesare with the New York Observer. I was hoping to hear a little bit more about the James Webb Telescope dual approach that's being applied here. Just a bit more detail on why you would do that and what are some of the benefits. And as an extension, will the delay have any impact on the science?
Okay, so you're talking about us working with James Webb to, yeah, so think about it. When James Webb was first designed, there was no such thing as an exoplanet that had been discovered. So it wasn't purposefully set out to have part of its mission be exoplanet research. So what's happened is, since Kepler's discoveries, there's been a thought that, hey, this very powerful telescope could be used for things like understanding atmospheres of exoplanets. So turns out again, though, that the Kepler targets that they looked at are very far away, very dim, and you wouldn't get enough light. And the goal is that you've got this star shining, a planet passes in front of it. If the planet happens to have an atmosphere, that light comes through the planet's atmosphere. Some wavelengths are absorbed based on the chemical composition of the atmosphere. So what you see at Earth or at the James Webb's L2 location would be that spectrum that's had some of the elements reduced out of it, right? So that's what they're going to be doing. So the goal is for us to find these bright targets that are close enough to Earth that allows them to do that follow-up research. And they are not the only ones. So I think that's the key here, is that it's not just a James Webb enabling thing we're doing. It's to find those targets all over the sky. Ground-based research, bigger and bigger telescopes are being built on the ground, right? Future thoughts in the astrophysics division at NASA to build bigger and bigger telescopes in space. So following all the way to where you might be able to directly image an exoplanet someday, that's kind of the dream, right? Maybe you can study an atmosphere, but boy, wouldn't it be able to take a snapshot of an Earth-sized planet, not just some big hot glowing planet that maybe you can do today. So that's where we fit in. And the fact that the James Webb's going to launch later only gives us more time to complete a survey, do some ground follow-up, because some of the targets we're going to find are going to be false positives. We're going to look at the data, some ground research will follow up, and they'll say, that really wasn't a planet, it was a giant star spot. You just got kind of tricked on that one. So we're going to make sure we get the best candidates, and so their delay doesn't really affect us. And again, the database will be, it's going to be stored at the MAST. It's the archive up at the Space Telescope Institute in Maryland. So the data will be there, and again, it'll be all calibrated data. The tools will be there to use the data, and as we've seen in Kepler, there are tons of university students out there who would love to go into your archive and find their own exoplanets, and that's what we're really counting on. So we're providing a giant data set. Let the community go at it and find the exoplanets.
And we have 3 questions from Ask NASA.
Yeah, first question here comes from Twitter user Gene, who is asking for Robert Lockwood to answer. What will be the primary challenges that you see in getting to first light during the commissioning period? Are there any concerns?
No real concerns. We have a standard checkout of all the health systems of the spacecraft during that 5 days. We check for power, attitude control, thermal control, that the radios work. So that's a standard process for us to follow. We'll then turn it over to fire up the instrument data processing computer, and then for them to turn on their cameras 2 days later and get first light. So all of the procedures that we've instituted at our Mission Operations Center and working with the Payload Operations Center at MIT, they're all ready to go. They are fully set up to do all those commissioning activities.
All right, wonderful. Twitter user Philip here is asking, was Tess processed and encapsulated at Astrotech or a SpaceX facility or somewhere else?
Sure, so I'll pick that one too. We use the NASA Payload Hazardous Servicing Facility, or PHSF, which is on site here at Kennedy. We rolled in there on February 12th, had about 2 months of processing, and then we're encapsulated there in the PHSF and transported over to the Space Launch Complex number 40 a few days ago.
All right, and lastly, talking about the orbits here, Twitter user Jimmy is asking, how far from Earth will Tess orbit?
Okay, I'll take that one too. So the P/2 orbit has a 17 radius, Earth radius perigee. That is the closest a point of approach to the Earth is about twice the distance of the geosynchronous communications belt. Then its apogee, or farthest point from the Earth, is 59 Earth radii, and that's out beyond the distance of the Moon. But because we're in this resonant dance orbit, and I'm remiss to wave my hands around like I've seen George Rickard do many times, it's always out there when the Moon's not there, so it's doing a dance that's always avoiding the Moon and staying in this very stable resonant orbit.
Chris Gebhardt with NASA Spaceflight again for Hans. I know the launch window is very, very short tomorrow at only 30 seconds, but can you talk in general about any hold points in the count for Falcon 9 after fueling starts of RP1? Can you hold the count at any point without having to recycle and detank? And when's the last moment in the count that you could do that?
So I think we could hold it in theory when we still load RP1, but as soon as we start loading logs, it's basically a commitment to go or not to go. I do want to point out 30 seconds is basically, for that matter, an instantaneous launch window, more or less. But it has an upside. If there is a collision avoidance warning, we can move it a couple of seconds left and right and avoid it basically. So it's pretty easy for us to implement that.
Yeah, I'll take it. Sorry. So that launch window, it is essentially instantaneous, but we have 30 seconds. It would only move to the right. Actually, we're targeting the opening of the window. So if there is a COLA, a collision avoidance notice that we have to move it, our flight dynamics has set it up that we can move to the right as far as 30 seconds.
Yeah, and because there is no hold, so we're going to come in awfully early that morning, make sure the spacecraft powers up okay, and make sure we're ready to go. So even if we have to sit there idly for 4 or 5 hours, no problem. But if we run into any issues, we want to make sure we're ready to go when they go to fuel.
Hi, Ken Kramer for Hans. Since InSight's launching in early May, you just mentioned early May for the Block 5. I wonder, is there any interference there, any days you have to avoid because of that? And for the NASA people, what is the follow-on exoplanet mission after this? You used to have a coronagraph mission that I don't think you're doing anymore. What are the plans? Thanks.
Yeah, regarding the early May launches, I'm pretty sure the range will just deconflict that by a couple of days to make sure that we don't run into each other. But that's standard process.
And so it's still in formulation, but WFIRST is also going to be exploring exoplanets?
Besides WFIRST, I understand that.
So I do not have the details on that for you. I'll have to get back to you. I'm new to my job, so.
Well, and I think
you're not doing the coronagraph mission anymore, I guess, right?
I think there's still a lot of talk about doing something like that. I don't think there's any specific plans to do, and there's a lot of different ideas on how to do it. I think, again, the tools are being developed, people are thinking about it, but there's no funded program to finish and build something of that sort yet. I think, as Sandra said, the WFIRST is really the focus right now as a next step.
Just one more. Thaddeus is there at New York Observer. How do you think the public is going to react to this science when it hits the mainstream? Do you think it's going to tag on, have some, what are your expectations for the science when it happens?
Well, I'll take this one. It's fine for me. I think, well, when I talk to my wife about this, who is a little bit close to it because her husband's working it for 8 years, but she's not a scientist, and she is very excited about it. She sees it as extraordinary stuff. I've worked other missions before that weren't quite as compelling to her. They were exciting, but the idea of finding other things on other planets really just sparks something in people. So I think it'll catch on like wildfire. Kepler got a lot of hot topics everywhere. I think Tess is going to bring that to yet another level.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. If you look at what Kepler found, nobody assumed there'd be a planet that might be made all of diamond, or that there could be worlds that are all covered in water or things like that. So I think when everybody always says, what's your favorite exoplanet? It's like, I think mine's going to be whatever we find, right? And it's going to be solar systems you never imagined possible, that you use our model and you say, well, how did they come up with that? There's different ways of forming solar systems that we don't even understand right now. And I think the other thing, too, about Tess is that it's all about this, call it citizen science or what you may, is that our goal is not like in the Kepler case, the team went through the data over and over and over again, identified all the exoplanets. But then as they did that, the community at large started to learn how to write software to do that. So what's going to happen with Tess is what's most exciting for me is that people all over the world are going to go to that data archive, and years from now they're going to say, hey, I found a couple more planets over here. And so I think that engagement of a broad community versus just some few exoplanet experts, the world world of exoplanets is now so big as a scientific community that you're going to get a lot of science performed all around the world with our data, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and the other thing that is connected to this is that NASA asked for students, children, to draw their imaginations of what exoplanets would be and submit them. And we got tens of thousands, I forget the exact total number, that we then loaded onto a memory stick that's actually glued onto the bottom of the spacecraft and is going to go into orbit with her. So there was tremendous excitement about it, and some of those pictures are quite fantastic. So.
Yeah, and now you have little kids who understand what an exoplanet is. I mean, that's a pretty incredible time in our history, right? That you now have little kids that grow up with this idea, oh yeah, there's plenty of planets out there.
Yeah.
So.
And do we have any remaining questions in the room? And with that, we'll conclude today's briefing. A reminder that the launch of Tess is scheduled for 6:32 p.m. tomorrow night. NASA television coverage will begin at 6 p.m. Until then, you can keep up with the mission by going to www.nasa.gov/SpaceX, or you can follow us on social media. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we are getting very close here on Fox 10 Extra. Going to be here with you in the next 3 minutes, just doing some lighting checks right here in the studio right now. All right, everybody, it is 10 o'clock, and you know what that means. It is time for News Now right here on Fox 10 Extra, because the news just never stops, and we have 2 more hours here of news headlines from across the country and right here in Arizona. Hi, everybody. Mike Pace here alongside Ron Hoon. Get you caught up on all the top here headlines, and yep, a lot going on today, and really the nation right now remembering Barbara Bush as well there.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because there had been a report, one of the networks prematurely reported that she had passed. And of course, that's a huge no-no in our business. You don't want to get something like that wrong, but when that story emerged, which was only about a day ago, it did, at least to me, it was a little bit of a heads up that, boy, she must be getting close.
Yeah, that.
I mean, you know, we had the announcement over the weekend that she wasn't going to seek any more medical treatment. It just felt like it was going to be happening very soon. And just the touching image of these 2 lifelong lovebirds, you know, I think she was 16 years old when they met.
Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah. You know, and all through the years, she just exemplified class. And I like what her son, George W. Bush, which, by the way, one of only 2 women in American history who can say, I was the wife to one president and the mother to another.
Look at that.
Right?
Wow.
So only Abigail Adams, the wife to John Adams, and then, of course, the mother to John Quincy Adams, can say the same thing in our nation's history. So truly one of the most unique Americans. And her love and support for, look at those old pictures right there. I'm loving this. Her love and support for her husband really was quite remarkable. You show some of these images from the old TV commercials. And man, she just was class and elegance, and yet a tough lady who you didn't want to cross her the wrong way.
They called her the enforcer.
The enforcer. And you see those images from the Capitol as well. You know, it's so interesting that George H.W. Bush had such a widely varied career. I think people forget. There's Casey Stiegel, in fact, one of our reporters.
There he is.
I think people forget that he was, in the days before we even had an ambassador to China, they had to almost like create a position for him before we totally normalized relations. I want to say they called him something like the official liaison to China.
Oh, wow.
Something along those lines, because we were in the process of slowly coming together in those years after Nixon went and climbed on the Great Wall, all those types of things. So he played a major role in developing U.S.-Chinese relations. He was, all the time that you think that he spent at the UN, you know, his military service is something that you know, he deserves a lot of credit for. And it just one thing after another. Then, of course, CIA, you know, kind of following in the footsteps of some of the other people who have run that organization, and then tapped by Ronald Reagan to be his vice president.
What a political run there.
It really was, you know, and I think he probably owes a lot to Ronald Reagan, the fact that he then was a successful vice president and then was able to run for president in 1988. I'll tell you something, Mike. I think it always was maybe just a little bit painful for the Bushes, for George and Barbara Bush, the fact that he did not win re-election 4 years after being in office. But I truly have always felt that he would have won if it hadn't been, I know people criticize him for the read my lips, no new taxes, and then there was a tax increase. And by the way, that is a political lesson that is still remembered by people today when they run for office. Don't say it if you don't mean it. So here's a guy who was headed into a possible re-election, and then you had the third-party candidate. And it just changed the complexion of the race. I want to say in the end that Ross Perot had almost 20% of the vote, pretty close to that. And so that took away just enough votes that we ended up with Bill Clinton as president. And it really kind of changed the course of, it was just fascinating to think what would have happened if George H.W. and Barbara Bush had had 4 more years in the White House.
True.
How would things have been different in that regard? So anyway, you know, a life of, what did George W. say? Of laughter, levity, and literacy.
Wow. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. You know, and here she is. Here's Barbara Bush, honored by the people out in the Mesa School District with an elementary school out there at about Higley and Brown Roads. And, you know, I think they had a moment of silence 90 minutes ago at 8:30 this morning out there in Mesa. And we had the pictures.
Yeah, I got some. I got some video of that.
Do you really?
Let me pull that up here. So this is we're taking right now a live shot there of the museum.
Okay, the Bush Library and Museum on the campus at Texas A&M.
But let me pull up this
University.
Let me pull up the school here, right here.
Oh, good.
So here we go. There's the video of inside the classroom there.
So I thought to myself, this will be maybe not for first graders. I'm not sure first, maybe or second graders, but I think for virtually most students at Barbara Bush Elementary, they will always remember the day that they stopped and had a moment of silence for the namesake of that school, which, by the way, is a top-notch school.
Nice,
out
very
there in the
nice.
East Valley. And so a pretty touching moment there. A very touching report to hear from their granddaughter, Jenna, that he held her hand through basically the entire final day on Earth.
Isn't that nice? That's
he
a nice
held her
report.
hand for all day, and It's really sweet.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. It really is. So we as a nation do remember her, and we're learning that the funeral is going to be on this Saturday.
Yep.
So it's going to be this Saturday there. And
it's interesting.
It's very moving.
Yeah, I believe the funeral itself, the service is going to be held at the Episcopal Church, where they attended for many years there in Houston. But then I'm also seeing a report that prior to that, her body will be there for viewing at a different church. I'm thinking maybe a larger church where they can accommodate more people. And so the people of Houston and Texas and even other parts of the country, I think, are going to be there in some pretty large numbers as these tributes pour in from all over the world.
Yes, they will be. All right, in other news here, we're learning a little bit more about this secret meeting there with North Korea, with the former CIA director Mike Pompeo going over Easter weekend there.
Yeah, over to North Korea.
This was big news.
Flying right into Pyongyang, having a meeting and managing to get out.
Yes, yes.
So, you know, it's interesting, Mike, because Washington is a city that leaks and leaks and leaks. There's always somebody who can't wait to sort of burnish their credentials with a friend in the media by placing a secret phone call. How did this story sit out there? Think about this. This was Easter weekend, which was April 1st.
Yes.
You know, and here we are now, almost 3 weeks later, and the story finally emerges. I cannot believe they kept that secret for that long. I mean, this is the first time a Secretary of State in waiting, not officially yet Secretary of State for our country, traveled to North Korea to meet with their leader. Obviously, it'll be quite historic. But, you know, the bottom line to this is take the measure of the man. Meet with him. See where things really stand. Are you really serious about denuclearizing that peninsula? What is it you want in return? Really lay the groundwork, but also just size him up as a man, his personality, you know, and then sit with the president and say, you know, these are the things that you need to know. I mean, I think it'll actually, this top secret meeting will prove to have been invaluable when that summit comes in about 6 weeks.
Yeah, so we will see there. And yesterday, Fox News' John Roberts was reporting that maybe one of the locations of this summit meeting could be in Vietnam. He said that is one of the contenders right now.
Okay.
He said there was up to 5 locations, and that's one of them.
Yeah, and I believe even the president had said something along the lines of that. These 5 locations. It just doesn't seem like I don't think it would be appropriate for the president to go all the way into Pyongyang.
No, no.
And I just cannot foresee. You know, even though I actually think Kim Jong-un would like for it to be in the United States. I think he would be fascinated. I think he would want to see the United States, but I just don't see that happening either. There was a famous case once of another, I mean, let's face it, the North Koreans are our enemies. And there was a famous case back in the 1960s of another nation that was truly our enemy back in the days of the Cold War, the Soviet Union. And Nikita Khrushchev came to the United States.
Oh, wow.
And he actually spoke at the UN. But then he was denied the ability to go to a new theme park back in the 1960s. And he threw a tantrum when they said you can't go to Disneyland.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Oh, it's like
because
showing it up in Wally World is closed.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, who knows what impressions, this is probably the one person inside North Korea who can watch anything and view anything that's not through the filter of the state government. Right?
Yes.
So, I mean, he probably sees plenty about the United States. It'll be really interesting. I've thought about China, of course, because that President Xi Jinping there has obviously played a key role in all of this. So I don't know if that would mean possibly a meeting in Beijing. That is where the 2 leaders of North Korea and China met secretly only a few weeks ago. So who knows? Who knows where it'll happen? It'll be interesting to see what some of these other names are just in the next few days.
Yeah, so we will continue to follow that story, and then we take a look at this story that really was one of the big talkers of the day yesterday, of the Southwest flight from yesterday that had to land, emergency landing in Philadelphia. after they had a major engine problem there. And then we learned a little bit later in the day that, unfortunately, one person on the flight passed away.
Yeah, and then we start to learn more of the details of how the passengers, you know, you can't believe, you hear a loud bang, there reportedly was a fair amount of screaming. It's understandable. I mean, I heard an interview with one passenger who said, I really didn't think we were going to make it out of this situation alive, and I was thinking, these are my final moments. Here's somebody in row number 17 who we presume was sitting right next to the window. And it all happened in just almost instantaneously. I mean, and the people who were there, I presume her row mates, her seat mates that were right there, are literally trying to pull her back in.
Yeah.
The reports that we have are that she was partly in and partly out.
How terrifying.
Of the aircraft for several minutes.
And you're thinking, I mean, that is up there at 30,000 feet, too. Yeah. I mean, this is just, that's a terrible, terrible nightmare there. And it's amazing that the crew was so polished still and were able to just be true pros about it and get that plane on the ground safely.
There are going to be a lot of stories in the coming days about not just people who were on board, but this pilot who, by the way, earned her wings as a Navy pilot years before, and then has been working for Southwest for some time since. And yeah, just the calm demeanor that she showed on the radio calls. And there have been some other instances where planes come down with just one engine, and my understanding is it's just extremely difficult to try to control that aircraft when you've got, I mean, think about if you've ever been in a boat and you just have the one oar. You know, it's just very kind of aeronautically to try to control the aircraft. But she brought it down. There was no additional loss of life, and a lot of people talking about her heroic efforts.
Yeah, so we'll continue to see if there's any more updates maybe today, a little bit later on with the NTSB. Maybe there will be, and we'll have that for you if there is. But I have one more story and video that I really want to show people, because this came into our newsroom today, and it is a terrifying video that was all caught on camera of a house explosion. Let me roll the tape here. This is in Hurst, Texas. This is dash cam video from police that were arriving to a call. So let me play it out here. So this is them arriving, and let me just show this to you. Watch what happens next, everybody. They get to the spot. It's going to happen right to the right here of this home. Look at that. Look at that. So that was just really, really bizarre. And let me play that out one more time. I know it cuts to black a little too fast there. Let me pull that. There we go. Wow.
This is incredible. I mean, the difference, you even hate to think about it here, but the difference between life and death.
Yes.
If those officers if one more stoplight had been green instead of red, I mean, the difference, it appears to me, is literally a matter of about 2 or 3 seconds.
Right, and amazingly, no one died there. When you look at that, you're like, okay, this is really rough. But people were able to walk away just with minor injuries. Yes. Amazingly.
Really incredible. That video is really stunning.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, glad everybody came out of that. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Well, Ron, thanks so much for coming on and giving us top stories here of the days. We continue on with News Now. More News Now coming up next, everybody. right, everybody, welcome back here to News and Now as we take a live look at downtown Phoenix on this Wednesday. We are halfway there to the weekend. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here as we continue on with the News Now, giving you the top headlines and stories from across the country right here in Arizona. Well, take a look at this next story as a condemned house gets on the market and goes for more than $1 million. Take a look at this story.
On Bruce Drive in Fremont, further proof the American dream is alive and well. A 2013 condemned 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with holes in the roof and mildew eating away the interior. Just sold for a whopping $1.23 million.
My neighbor told me that, and they said, oh, and cash. I said, oh, yeah, I can't believe it.
Neighbor Yvonne Yen lives next door and 12 years ago bought her home for $750,000. Realtor Larry Gallegos says the price differential reflects demand, as prospective buyers were burning up his phone from dawn till dusk. After a week, he chose one of 5 all-cash offers.
We had a couple offers that were pretty close. But actually, my clients, when I first met them, wanted just a little bit more than that with the price they had in their mind. But they ended up being happy with this one.
Gallegos says the sellers are a family that were unable to come to a consensus on keeping the house, so they decided to sell. The buyer actually designs green homes. He had a pocket full of cash. He's going to put his 4,000 square foot masterpiece on this large lot. He actually paid about $230,000 above asking.
There's nothing surprising about this. It's a great example of location, location, location.
David Stark of the Bay East Association of Realtors says buying a teardown to build a dream home reflects a 10-year trend. The Tony Mission San Jose section of Fremont is desirable, with the average home selling here for $1.3 million. He says unlike 2008, today's sky-high prices show no indications a crash is coming.
People are purchasing homes. They're purchasing vacant properties like this. The demand is there. The supply isn't. These prices are sustainable.
Back on the block, residents see both the blessing and curse of living in the land of 7-figure homes.
We're trying to move, because the property tax is cost me like $1,000 a month. And, but we have no place to move.
It's a paradox that has some homeowners suffering under high taxes, while others are able to unload their homes, even when they're unlivable. In Fremont, I'm Jesse Gary, KTVU Fox 2 News.
Only in California would you see a story like that. All right, taking a live look right now at the Dow right now as it's only up about 7 points now in the green as stocks are struggling for some kind of direction today, despite a modestly higher open as investors digested the latest corporate earnings reports in afternoon trade. The major U.S. stock indexes are mixed right now in a tight range. The Dow's reversal from early gains came as shares of IBM slumped following the company's after-hours earnings release. While IBM surpassed analysts' first quarter revenue and earnings expectations, its gross profit margin missed estimates. Morgan Stanley wrapped up bank earnings this morning, and other notable reports due later in session include Abbott Laboratories and American Express. So we'll continue to take a look here at how the market is doing throughout the show here on Fox 10 Extra right now. But as you can see here, pretty much flat for the day. All right, we have some other top stories here to bring you on in News Now. Take a look at this. A student getting a perfect score on the ACT.
Well, I scored a 36 on my ACT.
That's Dante Cardinelli. He got a perfect score on his ACT. I grabbed Dante right before his history class at CSN. He's in high school, but yes, he's already taking college courses.
Well, it's a pretty rare accomplishment because only about 0.1% of test takers get that score. So it's a pretty big deal to me and my family.
Dante is modest and says he works hard, and he doesn't like to tell too many people about that perfect score.
I don't really go around telling a lot of people, but if they ask, I'll tell them.
His mom, on the other hand,
and there's Dante,
could go on and on about her son.
Wonderful son. He opens the car door for me all the time. He always does, and I mean, he runs to get the car for me.
Dante's mom, Tess, says she's not surprised by that score and says Dante has always excelled in school.
At 1 or 2 years old, he was reading. He read the Bible from cover to cover over and over again. By the time he graduates high school, he will already have his associate's degree.
But Dante, he's not just making history for his academics. He also made history when he sang the national anthem for the very first ever Golden Knights game.
And we were part of history with, being the very first to ever sing the national anthem for our Vegas Golden Knights.
And it's not just that.
A music group with my brothers. We actually just got signed, I think it was a few months ago.
And beyond the music, this teen already has his sights set on his future and is planning on Stanford.
On early action, which is my goal, my dream school.
Today, I am the office manager of a law firm. Maybe I will be the office manager of his law firm. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, the sky's the limit with Dante.
There we go. Yes, they are. Talented family and very, very smart kid there. So wishing him the very best in his future plans there. All right, we are getting another update from the White House on maybe their direction that they are going to for the opioid crisis. Take a look at this.
The U.S. Justice Department is again going after opioid manufacturers. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is proposing new regulations limiting opioid production. They would change how the DEA establishes so-called production quotas. Pharmaceutical companies would have to work with various agencies to justify large amounts of pills. Ultimately, the feds would have the final say.
If DEA believes a company's opioids are being diverted or misused, then they will be able to reduce the amount of opioids the company can produce and sell.
The vows to end the crisis are more than just talk. State and federal authorities on Tuesday conducted a massive crackdown in West Virginia and Michigan. The target, a multi-state distribution network called the Peterson Drug Trafficking Organization. West Virginia U.S. Attorney Michael Stewart says this was no street-level raid.
Today's arrest was not a matter of picking up addicts or picking up folks who are corner store drug dealers. This was a matter of trying to change supply.
Tuesday's operation plus other smaller recent raids have netted enough fentanyl to kill a whopping 250,000 people. Stewart and Sessions promise more crackdowns are coming.
Business as usual is over. Ending the drug crisis is a top priority.
According to Sessions, there will soon be substantial increases in funding to combat the opioid crisis. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
Thanks so much there, Lauren, as we take a live look right now at the Capitol. And right now, a lot of people are remembering First Lady Barbara Bush, as we learned late last night of her passing. Here's a story with her.
Morning at a Mesa Middle School, remembering Barbara Bush, with her namesake, Barbara Bush Elementary, held a moment of silence for Mrs. Bush, and students will also be putting together a book to show their appreciation of the former First Lady.
Former First Lady Barbara Bush, yesterday at the age of 92, passed away. She was struggling with health problems like COPD and pulmonary disease and congestive heart failure.
She refused further medical treatment a couple of days ago and then passed quickly. Her funeral will be held Saturday at the church she attended with her husband in Houston. Casey Stiegel now is live in Houston with more, and I'm sure there's a huge outpouring today, Casey.
Troy and Andrea, you can say that again. We'll have more on the funeral and the public viewing and other events that are planned here in Houston and elsewhere in a moment. But first, a look back at a woman who changed the world.
Barbara Pierce Bush developed a love for language early in her life. As the daughter of a career magazine publisher, her mother and father read to her beginning the day she was born, on June 8, 1925, in Queens, New York. She met George Herbert Walker Bush at a Christmas dance when she was just 16.
I don't know anyone funnier than he is.
They were engaged within a year and a half and married in 1945 when George returned home from the war. The couple moved more than 24 times during their marriage. They settled in Midland, Texas in 1950, where George built a business in the oil industry. Barbara Barbara raised their 5 children, George, Jeb, Neil, Marvin, and Dorothy. Little Robin died from leukemia just before her 4th birthday.
If you have 5 children, all 5 are very, very different. But in our case, all 5 are very close. Very close. I mean, it's wonderful, and it makes George and me, my husband and I, feel just great that they love each other so much.
The family moved to Houston in 1959, and 5 years later, Barbara began the first of a lifetime of political campaigns. George lost his Senate bid, but was elected to Congress in 1966. He was named ambassador to the United Nations in 1971, then served as a chairman of the Republican National Committee, chief liaison to China, and director of the CIA by 1976. Her return to Washington during this time was said to be very difficult, and Barbara suffered from depression. George was elected vice president, serving under Ronald Reagan in 1980. Neil's diagnosis as dyslexic many years before had renewed Barbara's interest in language and reading skills, and she made it her platform as second lady to confront both child and adult illiteracy.
I decided that I wanted to do something that would help George, that would help the most Americans possible without costing the government huge amounts of money.
She became the first candidate spouse to address the National Convention when her husband was nominated for president in 1988. Barbara was a key asset to the campaign. Appearing in ads emphasizing her domestic and motherly roles, she had a reputation for being outspoken and was actively involved in the campaign strategy. But for the most part, she kept out of the political discussions and controversies. As First Lady, Barbara remained committed to bettering the literacy rate, which she called the most important issue America had, and founded the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy.
And even after the White House, up until the end, Mrs. Bush still worked for the Barbara Bush Foundation, which promoted reading, and that was a passion that she had, and she was active really up until the very end. Back out here live now in Houston, we are in front of the funeral home where Mrs. Bush is being prepared for public viewing on Friday. She will lay in repose from noon until midnight at the family church, the St. Martin's Episcopal Church here in Houston, Texas, from noon on Friday until midnight, and then Saturday, a private funeral where some 1,500 dignitaries are expected, including First Lady Melania Trump. That was just confirmed this morning. But, you know, guys, so many interesting stories that we've read over the last several days once we got down to Houston when the news broke that she was not going to pursue further medical treatment. And, you know, it's really the love story between her husband and herself that is so remarkable and so endearing. And last night, a spokesperson for President George Herbert Walker Bush sent something out saying, how is he doing? And they said that he was by her side when she left this great earth, and that he held her hand all day. And then Jenna Bush Hager, George W.'s daughter, said that every single night they were together, George said, I love you, Barbie. Good night. And as we stood outside of the gates of that neighborhood last night and did our reports, I couldn't help but think to myself, for the first time in some 70-plus years, Mr. Bush was going to sleep by himself and not saying, I love you, Barbie. Pretty powerful.
What a love story it was.
It was.
Longest ever presidential marriage, and she was such a force of that family. Maybe not out front, maybe not jumping on different policy issues, but like the chief advisor for the whole family.
She really was, and you know, a lot of historians and stuff have said that she was pulling a lot of the strings behind the scenes, that she was consulted and had a lot to say. She had a lot of opinions, not only in the political world, but as you said, in the family as well. I mean, the matriarch of a dynasty, the Bush dynasty, really. I mean, one of only, Abigail Adams was the only other president's wife who saw her husband and her son go to the White House. So Barbara Bush, just remarkable all the way around, Troy and Andrea. Special lady.
Casey, thank you very much.
Nice job out there, Casey. Appreciate it. And we will be right back.
And it doesn't matter to you.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm cool. So.
All right. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Give you vouchers, or would they give?
It's like, that's fine. They gave us, they gave everyone $200 vouchers. So I was like, that's fine with me.
When it first
Let's hit some more birds. No,
when it first
kidding.
hit, did you even say what was that, or were you just enjoying and you didn't think much of it?
What'd you say?
When you first felt the boom.
And welcome back, everyone, here to News and Now as we take a live look at the Loop 202 eastbound there right by Country Club on this Wednesday. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here as we continue on with News Now. In just a little bit, we are going to be getting an update on another Southwest plane scare that was happening this morning, and it was had to do with a flight that was Phoenix bound. We'll get to that in a minute, but here's the latest update with the scare that happened yesterday.
Southwest Airlines says the aircraft was inspected just 2 days before Tuesday's flight that left a woman dead. She's been identified as a mother of 2 from New Mexico.
This is a very sad day, and on behalf of the entire Southwest family, I want to extend my deepest sympathies.
7 others were injured. The CEO of Southwest Airlines says his company is working with the National Transportation Safety Board to find out what caused the apparent failure of the left engine of a Boeing 737 mid-flight.
One of the fan blades, the number 13 fan blade, was separated and missing. There's evidence of metal fatigue where the blade separated.
144 passengers and 5 crew members were on board. The pilot, Tammy Jo Schultz, now being hailed as a hero.
This was not a big surprise of what do we do now. They knew exactly what to do, how to do it, and it shows because we had a safe landing.
Shrapnel from the engine breaking a window in row 17. The pressure partially sucking a woman out of the opening. She was pulled back into the plane by fellow passengers, but later died from her injuries. Others on board described what it was like, wondering if they would survive.
As the plane was just going down, we literally just felt like we were just falling from the sky. I looked to my left and the engine's just totally done.
This is the first fatality for Southwest Airlines and is the first death of a passenger on a U.S. airline in nearly a decade. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
Thanks so much there, Lauren. And we're now talking about another Southwest plane scare that happened a little bit ago, earlier this morning. And our very own Linda Williams is on the phone right now. Linda, can you hear me?
Good morning, Mike. Yeah, we are still at Sky Harbor Airport.
Okay, so you're at Sky Harbor right now still. So tell us about this, another plane scare today with Southwest.
This was a Southwest Flight 577 flying out of Nashville, heading for Phoenix this morning. And as they took off at 5:13 from Nashville, 70 passengers on board. But they hit a bird. They're calling it a single bird strike. And we talked to passengers about it, and they said they definitely heard that bird, actually strike the plane. The pilot determined it was an emergency and returned to Nashville. They took off at 5:13. They returned to Nashville at 5:37 this morning. Then they needed to check out that plane, so they got all the passengers off of that flight, put them on another Southwest jet, and flew them out here to Phoenix. They got here about 2 hours later than they should have, and we were waiting on the ground to talk to them about the experience. Obviously more tension-focused, people more jittery because of what happened tragically to the Southwest 737 yesterday. I think everyone's mind is probably a little more uber-focused on this incident than it might have been otherwise. But we talked to passengers. They were very chill. They were very complimentary about how the crew handled everything. A young woman we spoke to, her name's Hannah. She's here to hike Sedona. Very excited to be here. She said she hadn't even heard about the earlier Southwest incident where a passenger was actually killed. And she said that they were, Southwest took really good care of them, gave them $200 vouchers just to smooth things over. Everyone was thrilled to get those for future travel. And it was a good deal. But we talked to several people. People said they were mildly alarmed at the most. And like I said, we talked to Hannah, and I think she kind of embodied what everyone felt about the whole bird strike incident.
Okay, let's play. I'm going to play right now Hannah's sound right here.
Good deal. Okay.
That's fine with me.
When it first
Let's hit some more birds. No,
when it first hit, did you even say what was that, or were you just enjoying and you didn't think much of it?
What'd you say?
When you first felt the boom or whatever it was.
Well, it wasn't really like a boom. I just heard like a loud noise. I thought it might have been the motor, but it was really, really loud. So I wasn't really sure, but yeah.
When did you find out it was a bird strike?
We had been in the air for maybe 20 minutes, and then they made an announcement. They just said that we needed to land. They didn't say what was going on yet, though. So, but they said it was a non-emergency, and I trusted that. So.
Thanks.
All right there. So, yeah, we just heard there from Hannah and Linda. Yeah, no doubt that it had to be on everybody's mind. I mean, this is just fresh what happened yesterday.
Yeah, I think the passengers on board who had heard about that earlier tragic incident were certainly more on edge. I think it also helped that they weren't sure what it was. She wasn't anyhow, and I think other passengers as well heard the boom or the bang and thought, whoa, what was that? And apparently when the pilot came on, she just said, folks, we have to turn around. It is non-emergency, in an abundance of caution. I think that's probably protocol for them, bird strike. And was very calm, and everyone was, not happy to be getting to Phoenix 2 hours later, but so relieved to be here on the ground safely this morning. They got here at about 9:30.
There we go. Well, Linda Williams, thanks so much for calling in live there from Sky Harbor with this update here. Thank you so much, Linda.
Sure.
All right, more news now coming up next, everybody. Hey there, hi, how you doing? All right, can you hear me there?
Yep.
Good stuff. And welcome back, everyone, here live to News Now as we get you caught up on all the top headlines here of the day on News Now. I'm your host, Mike Page. Continuing on here, we are awaiting right now a live shot there from California, right there on the border, where we are going to be seeing the Secretary there of Homeland Security looking at the border, and then after that, she is going to be coming to Yuma, Arizona. And right now, our very own Steve Kraft is live on the phone with us now. He's traveling to Yuma to talk about this story. Steve, how you doing?
What's up, Iron Mike?
There we go. All right, so once again, you are on the road here now, this time to Yuma. So tell us what's the latest with this story.
I wish I got paid by the mile. I'd be a wealthy guy. But anyway, yes, we're on the road again. We were in Nogales last Friday. As governor was down there talking to the Tucson sector of the Border Patrol, photo opportunity and a media opportunity to showcase the new deployment of National Guards members to assist the Border Patrol on that part of the border. Now we're going to Yuma. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen will be joined by, once again, Governor Doug Ducey. This time, they've got a more imposing physical wall to use as a backdrop in San Luis port of entry, and the Yuma sector, which has a wall that the president would like to see replicated across the entire over 2,000 miles of border between the U.S. and Mexico. It's kind of a showcase for the wall. Of course, Congress denied the president's request for the $25 billion plus for the wall. And in lieu of that, we have a show of force along the border with Border Patrol deployments in states along the border that Republicans control at the governor's office. So that would be Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, all three of which have Republican governors. California's governor, Democrat Jerry Brown, has declined so far to participate in this program. He's had differences of opinion with President Trump. That's no secret. So California, at this moment, had shown some interest in having about 400 guardsmen and women deployed, but they were unable to reach an agreement as to exactly what their mission would be with the feds. So that is now off the table. California is not participating in this effort. But Arizona is, enthusiastically. Governor Ducey will be talking about bolstering the border. The larger question is, why now? The answer is hard to say, because activity along the border has had a spike month to month this year over last year, but on an annual basis, it's about the same as last year so far. And certainly over the course of the last number of years, border crossings have been going down continually. And the Trump administration's own admission, we're now at the lowest point since the early 1970s. That should be trumpeted as a great success for President Trump. But instead, it is being used really to justify the need for a border wall. And since Congress didn't pony up the money to do that, the president is kind of, I think, perhaps appealing to his core supporters by calling out National Guards members. What are they going to be doing? Nothing on the border itself. By statute, they're not allowed to. But they will be assisting behind the scenes, helping with surveillance, helping rebuild infrastructure, towers, etc., clearing weeds and brush in the vicinity of that area around the wall so that the Border Patrol can have more boots on the ground on the border, so to speak, do their job without having to do some of those background tasks. So we have a relatively small number of guards people who will be doing jobs that we will never see, but that will help the mission, they tell us, of the Border Patrol itself. We'll be asking Secretary Nielsen about the specific mission, what the justifications were for the mission, whether this is really more political grandstanding than something that tactically needs to be done. But then, of course, on the other side of the coin, there is a continual or serious threat of transnational crime across the border that all administrations take seriously, including President Trump's administration. And we'll be asking her about narco trafficking and how the United States is doing so far. And that's, of course, one of her top priorities. And it's also a priority for Governor Ducey, who doesn't want to see crime and violence along the border either. Also, in the sense of fairness and showing some context here, we should point out that both of President Trump's predecessors, Democrat Barack Obama and Republican George W. Bush, also called up the National Guard to help along the border. They did that, of course, at times when there was a lot more flow of illegal immigrants across the border. President Obama, in about 2011, 2012, when there was an influx of women and children from Central American countries fleeing violence, streamed across the border in Texas and Arizona. And President George W. Bush, back in 2006, when there was a lot of trafficking across the border, human trafficking, and he called up the National Guard in that case. We will also ask how long the Guard is going to be deployed in this particular instance, and when can they go home? When are conditions sufficiently under control that it's okay for them to draw down and go back to their bases in Phoenix and other parts of the state? So lots of questions. Lots of good visuals today, lots of great opportunities for photographs, and we will present all of those things, of course, on News Now and on our Fox 10 Facebook. We almost got run over by a semi here. I have to point that out. Interstate 8, we just passed Gila Bend. We're heading towards Yuma, and this guy in the semi decided he'd just go off the road for a while.
Oh, wow. Well,
he's back, so that's good. We passed him. We pushed it by him. Anyway, so a lot of questions, and we'll have all that, of course, as well as on our newscast at 5 o'clock, certainly coming up later today on Fox 10. So that's the situation from here, Mike. An interesting day, beautiful out here in western Arizona, and a good opportunity for us to meet a very important federal official in Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, Department of Health Services, and of course, anytime we can talk to the governor, that's always great. And perhaps we'll be able to ask him a little bit about if he's concerned about the teachers who are in the process of voting whether to walk off their jobs, even though he's offered a pay raise. So last time we wanted to ask him that, they kind of wouldn't let us get to that, and they kind of ushered him off the stage pretty fast in Nogales. Maybe this time he'll talk to us a little bit longer. So we'll see. So that's what's going on from here. Mike, back to you.
All right, Steve. Thank you so much there for that update as you guys are getting a little bit closer there to Yuma, and we'll be checking out the story a little bit later on Fox 10 News at 5. Thanks so much, Steve.
You got it, man. Bye.
Thank you. All right, and that was our very own Steve Kraft there giving us an update there. So we will have that story a little bit later on Fox 10 and News at 5. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here as we continue on with News Now. We'll take you out to D.C. right now, where House Democrats gave their weekly news conference. It does not look like there was any audio attached with that one, so we will try to get that a little back for you in just a little bit if we could get the audio there. But let's take a live look right here at Daytona Beach, Florida right now, as it is looking just absolutely great out there, and it's even great here in Arizona. So people in Florida and Arizona are very, very happy with the weather, no doubt, as it is playing out really, really great. All right, well, I do have a top story here to get to you, and this has to do what we talked about this a little bit earlier today about the U.S. North Korea secret mission. Here's the very latest with that. Okay, so we're having just a little bit of audio problems here. We'll be back here with more News Now and as we get that squared away for you.
We have had talks at the highest level, and it's going very
Mr. Rosenstein. And in fact, a move to fire Mr. Rosenstein is
All right, everybody, welcome back here to News Now as we take a live look at Daytona Beach, Florida here on this Wednesday. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here, continuing on with News Now as we give you the top headlines and stories here of the day nationally and, of course, right here in Arizona as well. We will have all of that and more for you right here on the News Now in just a little bit. This is coming up in our feeds right here. We are expecting in just a little bit from California, the Homeland Security Secretary going to be talking about border security there. So we'll have that for you in just a little bit. But let's take you to the House Democrats talking about their weekly news conference.
Mr. Rosenstein. And in fact, a move to fire Mr. Rosenstein is the same, in my opinion, as shutting down the investigation and firing Mr. Mueller. And so that mustn't happen. That would certainly create a constitutional crisis. But my Republican colleagues and their leaders are turning a blind eye to this threat on the horizon. Speaker Ryan and Leader McConnell seem content to let this chaotic Trump administration run afoul. We need to be doing more. The American people expect us to do more. They expect us to act. Democrats are ready, and I'm waiting on our Republican colleagues to meet us in that challenge. And with that, let me turn it over to the Vice Chair of the caucus, Ms. Linda Sanchez.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. I join Joe in expressing condolences to the Bush family on their loss and the country's loss, really, with the passing of Barbara Bush. Yesterday, in case it escaped your notice, was tax day, and I hope that everybody got their taxes done on time. But as millions of Americans paid their taxes, they're watching the GOP's tax giveaways go to the biggest corporations and the wealthiest in this country. But I have faith in the American people. I know that they are smart. They understand that that tax plan does not really benefit the middle class in the way that it should. That's why the Republican signature achievement has become an anchor on their poll numbers. So despite the numerous attempts by Republicans trying to extol the virtues of this tax bill, they can't pull the wool over Americans' eyes. Democrats are committed to continuing to fight for a better deal, one that creates jobs, one that reduces the deficit, and one that puts the hard-working middle class of America first, not last. I joined Joe in my concern about the Mueller investigation. Firing Rod Rosenstein or Robert Mueller before the special counsel's investigation has been concluded would cross a huge red line, and the president must allow that independent investigation to run its course. We know that this administration has very little respect for the separation of powers, the Constitution, and allowing the rule of law to move forward. But we are urging all of our congressional colleagues here to ensure that that investigation is allowed to run its course. And with that, we will open it up for questions.
Any questions? Yes. Well, I'll speak first, and I'll turn to Ms. Sanchez. What I've been saying to my constituents back home who are concerned about the erratic behavior of this president and the chaotic nature of this White House is that there is in place an investigation that Mr. Mueller is conducting, and we need to wait for that investigation to be completed and for him to make his presentation to Congress. No one is above the law, but the law needs to be applied as well here, and that's what the standard I think we should wait for. Until we see the facts, you cannot. Certainly, I don't want to prejudice a case either for or against impeachment. And so I think that everyone is entitled to that. Let me turn to my colleague.
Just similarly, I respond that the investigation must continue. You cannot pursue a case for impeachment without the underlying factual basis for that impeachment. And we are confident that if the independent counsel is allowed to move forward, that we will have facts in hand at some point and can make a determination then.
Look, I think that it's critically important for Democrats to win back the House of Representatives because I don't believe that this House.
All right, folks, we just want to interrupt here, take you out to some breaking news right here in Phoenix right now. This is the suspect that you are looking at from yesterday's carjacking that took place in the Valley yesterday. This is all happening live right here on News Now, and just wanted to bring that to your attention right here. This is the suspect going that is in custody right here. So this is the suspect that was accused of those double carjackings that we saw that really took place much of the afternoon right here on News Now. So that is the Phoenix police taking that suspect into custody right there, and you saw it all unfold live right here on News Now as we bring you the top headlines and stories here of the day. And always when breaking news does occur, you know we have you covered right here on News Now for yourself. But we'll take it back out to that House meeting right now, already in progress.
Republican members individually received commitments for votes on legislative fix for Dreamers, and they're agitating as well. They want to see that vote come up. If there are a number of bipartisan bills that address Dreamers and DACA recipients, and we are trying to force the Speaker essentially to give us a vote, a Queen of the Hill vote, on several bills that are out there. Put them all on the floor and let the legislation with the most votes win. We're confident that it would provide that relief and that certainty. So there remains a lot of commitment, not just on the Democratic side, but among a group of Republicans as well, to try to make that vote a reality in this term. Sí, hemos estado luchando.
Last question.
Thank you.
On the question of oversight, we're starting to hear this more and more from Democrats lamenting the lack of oversight or the absence of it. If you guys take back the House, where do you see the most glaring holes in the oversight apparatus from Congress? And if you take back the House, who do you want to hear from? Who do you call to the Capitol? Is it a particular agency? Is it?
I think it's all the above. I think that just in the way in which the Ways and Means Committee, for instance, has conducted business, limiting really the time of the minority to even ask inquisitive questions of the Secretary of Treasury or the trade ambassadors. I think that it's all the above. The EPA and what's happening with Mr. Pruitt, the lack of outcry by Republican colleagues for his removal is deafening. But they're so slow, if to act at all or to even make statements at all, when there's such glaring problems within the administration, the swamp that has been created at this White House when it comes to the president's son-in-law, whether it's his family connections, or really holding him accountable as it pertains to a myriad of issues, including the money that they derive from their family by renting of their hotel. sell to foreign entities or to or special interest groups. Just a myriad of issues that are out there that this House of Representatives has not held the president's or his cabinet or this White House to accountability.
Could I just add that with respect to oversight, there would be a much more vigorous oversight, I think, starting with the EPA and Mr. Pruitt, prime example. Something like that would never have been tolerated.
All right, folks, we are just going to slide away from that House Democrats. Looks like we have a news conference happening right now with Phoenix police regarding yesterday's very, very bizarre police chase. Let's listen in.
Do you have any injuries from the dog?
It does appear that one of the injuries is a minor dog bite.
Who is he and what is he for? What kind of charges does he face?
So we're certainly looking at multiple counts of armed robbery. We're looking at multiple counts of aggravated assault. We're looking at felony flight or fleeing law enforcement vehicles. The cause of death for the dog has not yet been determined. If we can determine that he specifically caused this death, we'll certainly add a felony charge of harming a working animal. But as of now, our doctors have not yet been able to determine the cause of death.
So charges a working animal versus killing a cop?
Absolutely. It's a Class 6 felony to harm a working animal. Our dogs fall into the same category as, say, a service animal, seeing eye dog, one of those.
Yes.
So,
Are you releasing his name?
I will as soon as he gets further along in the booking process.
Was he involved in any prior, does he have a history with PD?
He does have a history with police involving similar incidents from yesterday, not as extreme, but other times that he's been operating stolen vehicles. He's been in stolen vehicles. He's fled from police in the past. He's barricaded himself in homes in the past. A lot of what we saw yesterday, he's done to us in previous occasions.
Has he DOC record?
I don't know for sure.
He was with a young woman. Anything you can tell us about her?
I know that yesterday she was booked at least for a charge of, she had a felony warrant for drug-related charges. And then her actions yesterday, she was clearly a willing participant in all of these offenses. So I have not seen her booking slip yet, but I would certainly believe that it would include charges of aggravated assault, armed robbery, and theft of motor vehicles.
Are you identifying her?
I will as soon as I verify her booking status.
Were any civilians injured in yesterday's incident?
No, how that did not occur is beyond belief. And I think we all watched this play out on television. We saw some extremely reckless driving, some complete disregard for anybody out there. But there were no reports of injuries to anybody other than the very minor injuries to the suspect and obviously our police dog.
The suspect was involved in another chase back in March?
I don't have the exact time that he was, but again, we do have prior incidents with him in stolen vehicles in very similar circumstances.
Sounds like drug use hasn't had a really good impact on this guy's life, has it?
No, I think it's very clear that what happened yesterday was certainly exasperated by illegal drug use.
Was he armed when he was taken into custody, or did you find the gun?
We did find the gun. The gun was discarded in one of the yards where he first jumped out of the vehicle. One of those 4 yards that we're all seeing on TV, we found the gun in that area, and then we knew that he also had guns, access to guns inside the home that he broke into.
Has a history of escaping?
Don't have that history.
What type of weapons?
So we know that he was armed during this with a handgun. We had the officer that was involved in the shooting that actually saw him pointing the handgun at people when he robbed the woman of her vehicle over at the mall at 24th Street and Camelback. We know that when he got into the home, there was access to rifles, and we know that the original stolen vehicle that he was in, there were indications that there was a rifle in that car when it was stolen. So we were certainly proceeding as cautiously as we could, but we recognized the high violence potential of this man, and we knew that he had to be stopped.
And the vehicle with damage to the windshield, were those bullet holes, those 4?
Those were bullet holes, yes.
Okay. Did he fire those, or is that the understanding?
No, I'm not sure which vehicle. I mean, the only ones I think right now, we believe that the officer shot at him. I don't think we've determined any evidence yet that he was able to shoot at the officer. So if we're talking about the officer's car out at the Biltmore, that was officer bullets.
Was the suspect familiar with the house that he broke into?
I don't believe he was. I think that's one of the benefits of us being able to use tire deflation devices, our spike strips. The benefit to that is we can disable that vehicle in an area that he may not be familiar with. We've been in certainly direct contact with the homeowners, and they've told us that they don't know this man at all. There'd be no indication that he had any relationship. It was just the closest place that he could take some refuge from in his flight.
What injury did he have that he had to be wheeled in?
I think it's a totality of, again, we deployed gas into the house yesterday to encourage him to come out. He had some minor injuries, and then he had some drug impairment. So I think the wheeling is a lot easier than having to get him to walk. He was combative when he left the hospital. It's easier to put him into a wheelchair and wheel him in versus trying to struggle with him while he's walking.
So you guys talked to him for a while here, and he's going to go get booked at county jail.
Certainly, we're going to give him the opportunity to share his side of the story. That's our hope, that it takes us a couple hours to get through that process. But in any event, he'll be booked into jail later this afternoon.
Was there a dog in that house with Bane?
Say again?
Was there another canine
No.
that was in the house with Bane?
No.
In a situation like yesterday, what is a canine Bane's duty?
You know, canines, Bane's, he becomes our eyes, he becomes our ears, he becomes our nose, and he becomes our locating device. So we knew this man was extremely violent. We knew he was very dangerous, and we knew he had access to weapons. We'd actually seen him with weapons. When the opportunity presents itself, we ask our dogs to do things that are above and beyond what most people are capable of. So working with our SWAT team, working with our canine handlers, the dog goes into the house with the intent on finding that man and helping subdue him before he can cause any more harm. Unfortunately, that didn't happen yesterday.
Did Bane get a bite on him before he...
Again, it appears that he did have a small bite on him and at least one section of his body. I haven't seen his injuries. He's just been released, so we'll look into that a little further.
So obviously Bane had attacked him or got him out of wherever he was and then was killed?
You know, so unfortunately, the officers weren't unable to see. So the dog went into the house again. He led the team in. He left their site. By the time the officers made it up to Bane, he was mortally wounded, and the suspect was then compliant. We dealt with the suspect. We took him into custody, and then we were able to extract Bane, take him off to the hospital, whereas we know he did not survive his injuries. But unfortunately, we did not get a chance to see what actually that encounter was between the dog and the suspect. Hopefully, the suspect will share what happened with our detectives today.
By the time
He was out of the attic. Yeah, the dog was not put up into the attic. The dog was just put into the house. The suspect had come down, whether he'd fallen down or whether he climbed down. He was down in the main part of the house at that contact.
At this point, are you saying, or do you know how the dog died yesterday?
No, we've actually taken him. He went to the emergency clinic. We've then taken him to a university where they were able to do a necropsy on him. That process is continuing. There are still some things to go, but at this point, we have yet to determine that cause of death.
But definitely not gunshot.
Definitely not gunshot.
So probably something force or strangulation.
Don't know. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. You got much. Thank you.
More specifics about the dog itself.
Okay.
Updating when we get named.
All right, so we were just learning an update there from police, unfortunately, that they lost one of their canine dogs yesterday, so we were getting that update as well of just that bizarre chase that we all saw on fox10phoenix.com yesterday of a chase that lasted for a good amount of while right here on News Now. So if we're getting more updates, of course, we will bring that to you right here on News Now. But we do appreciate everybody joining us here once again for you right here on News Now. We're going to take you now out to California, where there is an event happening right now. Let's take you out there live.
We will not give in, and in the long term, Los Alamitos will do what is right because they must follow a higher law, and the community here is united to stand for justice. Amen. Thank you.
And next, we're going to be hearing from several of the plaintiffs, beginning with some of the representatives from Los Alamitos Community United, starting with Monica Glicken.
Hi everyone, my name is Monica Glicken. That's M-O-N-I-C-A. Last name is G-L-I-C-K-E-N. I am one of the members of Los Alamitos Community United. I am an immigration attorney at Public Law Center, a mom, and a local resident. Our group, Los Alamitos Community United, has come together because we are diverse residents that cherish and want to promote the beauty and diversity of Los Alamitos, not divide it. We are extremely concerned and saddened by the decision of the Los Alamitos City Council to pass this illegal and divisive ordinance. It is with regret that we join as plaintiffs in this lawsuit against the City of Los Alamitos. We hope that the City of Los Alamitos and our City Council, although they declined to listen to the desires and wishes of their local residents at their meeting yesterday, that they will, if nothing else, listen to the dictates of the court about what is not just legal, but what is right. Our group, Los Alamitos Community United, includes a diverse group of people who live and work in this community. We include youth who go to school here in Los Alamitos. We include families who reside here, homeowners, business owners, and we are all concerned and deeply impacted in different ways by this illegal ordinance. So we stand for California values.
Los Alamitos.
United.
We'll never be divided.
Los Alamitos.
United. We'll never be divided.
Next, we'll be hearing from Michelle Teal, who also represents the overwhelming support from the youth in favor of California values, and in particular from Los Alamitos High alumni. Michelle Teal.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Teal. That's MICHELLETIO. I'm here today with Los Alamitos Community United. I live 5 minutes away from here. I went to Los Alamitos High School. I am an alumni, and I'm here because I personally know undocumented individuals and families who will be affected by this illegal ordinance. Furthermore, I want to emphasize that there are currently Los Alamitos students and youth who are undocumented. They are hidden, but they are there. Some of my friends I went to high school with, I did not know until after we graduated that they are undocumented. So they are here, and I'm here to represent my friends. Thank you.
Los Alamitos.
United. We'll never be divided. Los Alamitos. United. We'll never be divided.
Next, we'll be hearing from Barbara Farrell, a longtime resident and a retiree who lives here in Los Alamitos with her family for a decade.
My name is Barbara Farrell, B-A-R-B-A-R-A, Farrell, F as in Frank, A-R-R-E-L-L. I am a member of Los Alamitos Community United, and I think it was very important to form this organization because the voice of the individual residents was not being heard. We understand that this ordinance is illegal and it defies the state law. Yesterday, the Supreme Court said that deportation law is too vague to enforce. So the state of California has a very clear law about deportation that I support. I am the child of an immigrant, 2 immigrants actually, and I've lived in immigrant communities my whole life. And my neighbors are living in terror and horror of the things that are going on around them. Families are being torn apart. Legal children separated from their undocumented parents. How can we live like this? Our neighbors are in fear. We can't allow this to go on. That's why I asked that that we would file this court measure. Thank you.
Next, we'll be hearing from another plaintiff in the lawsuit, attorney Henry Josephsberg.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Henry Josephsberg, J-O-S-E-F-S-B-E-R-G. I am one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. Others can speak far more eloquently than I about immigrant experience. I am the son of an immigrant, but my father came here in 1923. Other people can speak to what happens to them in the here and now. What I'd like to speak to momentarily is the constitutionality of what Los Alamitos has done. The agenda item for this particular ordinance told us that they wanted to support the Constitution. I endorse that. We should support our Constitution, and in ruling on this ordinance the way Los Alamitos did, it violated the state constitution. In case after case, the California Supreme Court has told us that municipal organizations may not themselves determine constitutionality of a particular state law and determine, oh, we just don't want to file that. We must enforce every piece of our Constitution, including the separation of powers that tells us that the courts are the ones to determine constitutionality of legislation. There is exactly that going on right now. The Department of Justice is suing the state of California to determine the constitutionality of the California Values Act. That is how it's supposed to be done. I resent and object to the city of Los Alamitos telling me that I need to spend my tax dollars on what is not an appropriate way to handle this. The appropriate way to handle constitutionality is through the courts, and that's what we're doing. Thank you all so much.
Los Alamitos United
will never be divided.
Los Alamitos United
will never be divided.
Thank you. Those were some words from our legal team. Those were some words from the plaintiffs in the lawsuit that was filed today against the city of Los Alamitos for siding with a terribly hateful and divisive agenda being advanced by the Trump administration against the entire state of California. And we are very proud to stand alongside such a beautiful...
All right, so we've been listening into that news conference there in Los Alamitos, California, after hours of this heated debate. Yesterday, the city council voted to exempt itself from California's sanctuary state law after a peaceful but noisy confrontation by pro and demonstrators. The city council began hearing hours of public comment on whether it should enact an ordinance exempting the city on grounds that the state law is unconstitutional. Monday's vote was the second vote by the city council. In March, the city approved an ordinance to preliminary opt-out of California Values Act. The recent vote sealed the deal and made the city illegally exempt. So we will continue to monitor this story here for you. More news now coming up next. And welcome back here to News Now as we take a live look at Tampa, Florida on this beautiful day here, Wednesday. Welcome, everyone, here to News Now. I'm your host, Mike Page. As we continue on with News Now, we're going to keep you out in Florida because today, in a little bit, about 3:50 our time, Arizona time, they are going to be expecting a SpaceX launch at Cape Canaveral there in Florida. This time, NASA is going to be sending up one of their satellites, and this is going to be a satellite that's going to look for other planets here in our universe. So let's listen to a little bit of that as we get ready for that SpaceX launch about 3:50 our time here in Arizona.
Hans Koenigsmann, the Vice President of Build and Flight Reliability at SpaceX, and Mike McAleenan, Weather Officer from the 45th Weather Squadron. We'll begin with opening comments from our participants and then turn it over to questions in the room. We also have Ask NASA questions and a phone bridge. Sandra?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. In 1958, we launched the Explorer 1 satellite, which discovered the Van Allen radiation belt around the Earth and began a long series of high science payoff, low cost class missions. Tess continues this series of Explorer-class missions just a few months before NASA's 60th anniversary. Please tee up the video. Tess will find thousands of exoplanets outside our solar system around nearby stars so that we can search for the ingredients and possible signs of life in conjunction with our other missions such as the upcoming James Webb Space Telescope. Tess will hopefully find the nearest of our exoplanet neighbors, those that may be visited in the distant future when humans leave our solar system for the stars. The success of Tess could not have been possible without the outstanding contributions of our partners. I truly appreciate the brilliant minds that have contributed in making the spacecraft, launch, and operations a reality. NASA's discoveries have transformed our understanding of ourselves, the Earth, the solar system, and the universe. We expect Tess's discoveries to do the same. I want to end with saying, go Falcon 9, go Tess, and over to you, Jeff.
Thanks. So as a project manager, I've been on this project for 5 years, and it's been an amazing ride. So we've had great partnerships with Orbital ATK, MIT Lincoln Laboratory, Ames Research Center. It's been a wonderful ride to here. It's been great getting to know the SpaceX team and the Launch Services Program folks down at the Cape, and we are ready to go. And as Sandra said, Tess forms kind of a bridge between what we've learned about exoplanets to date and where we're headed in the future. And so everybody's heard about all the great discoveries that have been made by the Kepler Space Telescope. And so that, you think about Kepler, it only stared at one small portion of the sky, and they've found thousands of exoplanets orbiting outside of our solar system, but many of them too distant and too dim to do any follow-up observations. So the goal with our mission is now to do a full sky survey. Let's look all over the sky, and let's specifically look for candidates where there are planets orbiting stars that are closer to Earth, maybe only dozens of light years away to hundreds of light years away, and ones that are bright enough so that the light from those stars coming through the atmosphere of an exoplanet could be studied by something like the James Webb Telescope. And so that's a really big part of our mission, is to enable future exploration by providing a giant data set all over the sky of where these exoplanets are, the ones that are closest to Earth and brightest for follow-up observations, with the hope that someday in the next decades we'll be able to identify the potential for life to exist outside the solar system. So the most important part of this is the spacecraft itself, and so I'm going to let Robert talk more about that as the representative from Orbital ATK.
All right, Casey, can you hear me? We're doing a mic check right here. Nice to see you there today.
Hi there, Phoenix. I've got you. Mic check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Check 1, 2, 3, 4.
Gotcha, great. All right, Casey, we're going to be about 90 seconds away here.
Okie doke. And I'm speaking with...
Oh, my name's Mike. Mike Page.
Sorry, Mike. Okay. Hey, nice to talk with you.
Yes, you as well.
So what do you want? Just like a little scene setter, Q&A? What were we looking for here?
Yeah, let's do, we'll do a scene setter and then just maybe a couple back and forth about, are you seeing a lot of people come by today and stuff like that?
Copy. I'll just kind of set the scene and then just kind of go through the events over the next couple of days.
Awesome. All right, we're just a minute out there, Casey, and we'll be right with you.
Thanks, Mike.
Ready to see.
All right, everybody, and welcome back here to News Now. As you're taking a live look right there at Tampa Bay, Florida. Hi, everybody. Mike Pace here. And just last evening, we heard of Barbara Bush passing away, the former First Lady, passing away at the age of 92. And now joining us is Fox News Channel's Casey Stegall with the very latest on what we can expect in the coming days for Barbara Bush. Casey, how are you today?
Mike, good to see you. A pretty somber day in Houston and across the nation as people continue to seek additional medical treatments, and she was going into what they called comfort care, essentially hospice. We are outside of the funeral home right now where there is a very heavy police presence. This is where the body of Mrs. Bush was brought last night, their home not far from where we are, and there are a series of events going on over the next couple of days. Tomorrow, the city of Houston holding a celebration of life event at City Hall. Women are encouraged to wear those iconic big white pearl necklaces in blue, her signature color. Then on Friday, Mrs. Bush will lay in repose at the church here where they attended church, St. Martin's Episcopal. She will be on display from noon until midnight for the public to come through and to pay their respects and say goodbye. And then the following day, a private funeral held, invite only. More than 1,500 dignitaries will be in attendance, including First Lady Melania Trump, and from there she'll be driven to her final resting place up the road from here in College Station, Texas, on the Texas A&M campus at her husband's Presidential Library and Museum. Mike, that is where the family plot is. That is where her daughter is buried, Robin, a daughter that she and George lost just before that girl turned 4 years old. They lost her to leukemia, and so Barbara Bush will be laid to rest there, and it will ultimately be the final resting place of Mr. Bush as well. Mike.
And Casey, have you seen out there, people have been coming by and dropping off maybe a little memorial trinkets and stuff?
The funeral home here is pretty tight. There is a big police presence, as I've mentioned, a lot of Houston police. However, we were outside of the gates to the neighborhood last night, the day before, and there were a lot of people that had started to trickle through, dropping off flowers, people showing up with signs and praying outside of the gates to the neighborhood once the word began to spread that she had passed at home with her loving husband by her side. And we're also seeing people, this is pretty neat, putting out books at the Presidential Library up in College Station. As you know, Mrs. Bush was a fierce advocate for literacy. It was one of the big causes that she championed, not only as First Lady, but really up until the very end. And so in lieu of flowers and balloons, people dropping off books there at the library to pay homage to all of the work that she did. So lots going on over the next several days as the nation and the world really mourns the passing of Barbara Bush.
Yes,
back to you, Mike.
Definitely there. Casey Stegall, thank you so much for reporting for us with this live update right here on News Now. Thanks so much, Casey. And once again, thanks to Casey Stegall there for Fox News Channel reporting on the passing of Barbara Bush. Died at the age of 92 there. As you're taking just a look here at some of her past photos. Just a great memory there for so many, for people, as the former First Lady finally coming to peace right there.
June 8, 1925, in Queens, New York. She met George Herbert Walker Bush at a Christmas dance when she was just 16.
I don't know anyone funnier than he is.
They were engaged within a year and a half and married in 1945 when George returned home from the war. The couple moved more than 24 times during their marriage. They settled in Midland, Texas in 1950, where George built a business in the oil industry. Barbara raised raised their 5 children, George, Jeb, Neil, Marvin, and Dorothy. Little Robin died from leukemia just before her 4th birthday.
If you have 5 children, all 5 are very, very different. But in our case, all 5 are very close. Very close. I mean, it's wonderful, and it makes George and me, my husband and I, feel just great that they love each other so much.
The family moved to Houston in 1959, and 5 years later, Barbara began the first of a lifetime of political campaigns. George lost his Senate bid, but was elected to Congress in 1966. He was named ambassador to the United Nations in 1971, then served as a chairman of the Republican National Committee, chief liaison to China, and director of the CIA by 1976. Her return to Washington during this time was said to be very difficult, and Barbara suffered from depression. George was elected vice president, serving under Ronald Reagan in 1980. Neil's diagnosis as dyslexic many years before had renewed Barbara's interest in language and reading skills, and she made it her platform as second lady to confront both child and adult illiteracy.
I decided that I wanted to do something that would help George, that would help the most Americans possible without costing the government huge amounts of money.
She became the first candidate spouse to address the National Convention when her husband was nominated for president in 1988. Barbara was a key asset to the campaign. Appearing in ads emphasizing her domestic and motherly roles, she had a reputation for being outspoken and was actively involved in the campaign strategy. But for the most part, she kept out of the political discussions and controversies. As First Lady, Barbara remained committed to bettering the literacy rate, which she called the most important issue America had, and founded the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy.
And even after the White House, up until the end, Mrs. Bush still worked for the Barbara Bush Foundation, which promoted reading, and that was a passion that she had, and she was active really up until the very end. Back out here live now in Houston, we are in front of the funeral home where Mrs. Bush is being prepared for public viewing on Friday. She will lay in repose from noon until midnight at the family church, the St. Martin's Episcopal Church here in Houston, Texas, from noon on Friday until midnight, and then Saturday, a private funeral where some 1,500 dignitaries are expected, including First Lady Melania Trump. That was just confirmed this morning. But, you know, guys, so many interesting stories that we've read over the last several days once we got down to Houston when the news broke that she was not going to pursue further medical treatment. And, you know, it's really the love story between her husband and herself that is so remarkable and so endearing. And last night, a spokesperson for President George Herbert Walker Bush sent something out saying, how is he doing? And they said that he was by her side when she left this great earth, and that he held her hand all day. And then Jenna Bush Hager, George W.'s daughter, said that every single night they were together, George said, I love you, Barbie. Good night. And as we stood outside of the gates of that neighborhood last night and did our reports, I couldn't help but think to myself, for the first time in some 70-plus years, Mr. Bush was going to sleep by himself and not saying, I love you, Barbie. Pretty powerful.
Very powerful there. Thank you to Casey Steeler once again on News Now. More News Now coming up next.
I call this hearing to order, and will keep my opening remarks very brief because it's so important today that we hear from those behind the dais who have, not from us behind the dais, but those witnesses who have powerful stories that will resonate with each of us. To our witnesses, I've met most of you. I will look forward to having a conversation with you afterwards if that's desirable. But thank you for being here today to share your experiences with this subcommittee. I speak for all of us when I say that we're grateful for your representation of the United States of America, that you did so well, and that you've done so many things good outside even your sport. We appreciate your willingness to spend your afternoon with us and discussing ways that we can better protect our athletes. I believe we all wish to see Americans successful in international competitions and understand the value of encouraging young athletes to participate in our nation's thriving sports culture. This subcommittee, which exercises jurisdiction over the U.S. Olympic Committee and amateur sports, is fully committed to ensuring the health and safety of all American athletes, from youth sports to Olympians. In January, Senator Blumenthal and I have launched a bipartisan subcommittee investigation
She's super pretty.
All right, everybody, welcome back here to News Now as we're taking a live look at downtown Phoenix on this Wednesday. You'd like to call it Hump Day. Yes, it is. We are celebrating right here on News Now. Hi, everybody.
We're always celebrating on News Now.
Any day it is, really. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here. Mercy Jones.
Yes.
You had a fun story today, didn't you?
I did, and it was a little confusing. Okay, so all cards on the table. I only read the first line of the story, and it said 95,000 ladybugs released.
Wow.
Many things went through my mind, but the first one is...
First off, why?
Why?
Yeah.
And why so many? You don't need 95,000 really of any insect.
Yeah,
I can't,
right.
you know, it's just, it's odd. It's for a good reason, though. I like to kind of relate it to when we have problems in the canals, fish, all that kind of stuff, they release bigger fish into it to kind of get rid of the problem ones.
Yeah.
That's kind of the same thinking with this. So these ladybugs are actually going to help with some insects that are harmful to the environment around these schools, and they're making it a fun little interactive.
Fun day for them.
Yeah, take a look at these kids. Okay, so one of the moms actually gave me my favorite piece of information about this. I know. So she's sitting there, and you can tell it's not her first rodeo. She's got two babies on her hips. She's watching. She's keeping an eye on her other toddler. And she goes, yeah, it's all fun and games now when they go out and they see the ladybugs that they've been learning about. But she goes, pretty soon when they start to kind of spread out, she goes, it's just a massacre. Because these kids, you know, look at how tiny they are.
Yeah, right.
Of course, you know, the kids aren't trying to, but they were reading books about ladybugs, finding out all these fun little facts about them. They really worked it into a whole lesson plan for these kids. Environment, you know, respecting nature, all that kind of stuff. And then they get to do this. And it helps, you know, it helps their school.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it definitely does. And then they get to get really up close and personal.
Yeah, look at that.
I mean, that's all over her arm.
All over, yeah. So
and
I was
get some more comfortable too. I would think,
then you're not. Then they don't freak out when they see a ladybug.
Sure.
You know, they're like, "Hey, I read about those."
And did they say were any of the kids talking about anything about you know, good luck? Because it's supposed to be good luck, right?
Yes, and that's a lot of good luck, 95,000.
Yeah.
I had questions of my own, like, are all ladybugs females because they're called ladies?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know, what are the men bugs doing all day?
We never hear about man bug.
No, you don't.
And
you don't.
That doesn't seem too inviting.
No. A male bug.
Yeah, we're gonna get some 95,000
guy
male
bug.
bugs out here.
Yeah.
Guy bugs would be nice.
Guy bugs.
Yeah.
They're, you know, they're hanging out in their guy bug cave.
There you go.
Yeah, their man cave. But this was just so cute because they invited the students, and then a lot of their little siblings who aren't in school yet got to come, and it was a fun, you know, we like to talk about this all the time. We cover so many things that just, and particularly this week, we've had a lot of hard news to kind of digest.
Oh, sure.
And to just have something so innocent and so wholesome to cover just put a big smile on my face.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that's just a nice way to close out your week, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the teachers were happy. They even had somebody dressed up as a ladybug.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now, is this like in a Ziploc bag that they're pulling these
Yes.
from?
Okay,
Wow.
so I don't know why, but when I first was going to the story. It's like, okay, there's going to be a huge semi. They're going to open the doors, and it's just going to be chaos. But they're in these plastic bags in bins. See those bins all around the circle? And I was like, how'd they fit 95,000 in there? But I guess, you know.
Oh, sure.
Ladybugs don't take up a lot of room.
I bet the ladybugs were just fine, like, please just get me out of those bags.
Of course, yeah.
Then they go in a cup.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, you know.
Well, that's very interesting.
Bag in a bin to a cup, and then out to do their job.
Yeah, right. A cup. From a bag to a cup to the air.
I know. Great.
They got to learn fast.
Good times.
They got to learn fast.
But then what do they do when they have a ladybug problem? Release something else bigger?
Yeah, something bigger. It just keeps snowballing.
I know. They only kind of started the food chain with the ladybugs, thought about that way, but, you know, there's a lot of animals above ladybugs.
I know.
Hate to break it to you.
I hate to break it. There you
Love
go.
it.
Well, there we go, Marcy. I like that. That's
so
a good way to really ease it in, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, let's close it out on a good note.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well,
Thanks,
Marcy, thanks so much for coming on. And right now, we're going to take you out to a Senate hearing that's happening right now. This is to protect amateur sports stars from sexual assault. So let's take a listen.
Here today, Olympic medalists Jordan Weber and Jamie Dancher. Ms. Weber is a 2012 gold medalist and a member of what the media dubbed the Fierce Five. Ms. Dancher is a 2000 bronze medalist. These awards are distinctions, athletic distinctions, for ability and perseverance and hard work, but they deserve medals for courage and stamina in speaking out and standing up, and their courage in testifying numerous times, not just here. I'd like to thank Michaela Maroney as well. She's a 2012 gold medalist and a member of the Fierce Five, for her courage in submitting her written testimony for the official record. Her experience also points to systematic problems that need to be addressed because they will enable continued abuse. I want to say very bluntly, of particular concern to me are the reports that the USAG actively sought to silence Ms. Maroney with a non-disclosure agreement in response to a lawsuit she filed against the U.S. Olympic Committee, USA Gymnastics, and Michigan State University. Their multiple organizational failures to properly investigate, discipline, or remove abusers after complaints of sexual abuse are absolutely unconscionable. This non-disclosure agreement shows the hazards and dangers and damage that can be caused by those kinds of enforced concealment agreements. It would impose a $100,000 fine if the victim were to violate its confidentiality clause. By speaking out about the sexual abuse, as Chairman Moran has mentioned, as we continue this investigation, we're seeking answers about Ms. Maroney's story and others that have been silenced. So let me just say finally, across Olympic sports, there are stories of young athletes who have been victimized and have survived physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. It's an undeniable reality. We want to fight it and correct it and prevent it from happening again. And again, my thanks to Chairman Moran and Chairman Thune and Ranking Member Nelson, and most important, thank you to the survivors for your incredible courage in sharing your experiences and your stories and supporting others who have done so as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. A couple of observations. First of all, there's a vote now scheduled at 4:30, and we would hope to have our hearing concluded by the time of that vote. Secondly, Senator Blumenthal is correct. This is an ongoing investigation. I would make my fellow committee members aware, as well as others, that we have identified May the 22nd as our next hearing. We are in the process of inviting, but to date we have notified the USA Gymnastics, as well as the United States Olympic Committee and Michigan State, of our intention to have a hearing that would involve their participation as witnesses on that date. So it is work in progress, but it is one of the next steps that the subcommittee intends to take. With that, let me introduce, although the ranking member did an admirable job of introducing our witnesses. Our witnesses today are Ms. Jordan Weber, a gymnast and Olympic gold medalist from 2012 London. Ms. Jamie Dancher, gymnast and Olympic bronze medalist, Sydney in 2000. Ms. Bridie Farrenhull, a speed skater and 2014 Olympic hopeful, and Mr. Craig Morizi, a figure skater. With that, we'll take your testimony of approximately 5 minutes, and if there's things that you want to add to the record, we'd be glad to have additional comments in writing. Ms. Dancher.
Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Blumenthal, distinguished members of the committee, I am honored to appear before you today. 1 year ago, I testified in front of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee in support of legislation to protect child athletes from sexual abuse in gymnastics and other Olympic sports. That legislation is now law, and I want to thank all of the members of Congress in both parties who voted for it. I was the first Olympic athlete to come forward publicly and reveal Nassar's long history of abuse, and sadly, I was not the last. We now know that 4 of the 2012 Fierce 5 gold medal gymnasts are Nassar survivors, including my sister survivor, Jordan Weber. I let the world know that the former Olympic team doctor, Nassar, abused me at the USA National Training Center in Texas. He abused me in California and during gymnastics competitions all over the world. He even abused me in my hotel room in Sydney at the Olympic Games. I now understand that through all of that time, USA Gymnastics had policies that prohibited adults from being alone in hotel rooms with children, but they didn't enforce the policies. I knew at that time that speaking out would not be easy or painless. Back in 2000 as a teenager, I had the audacity to speak out against the abusive training methods employed by Bella and Marta Caroli, and I suffered criticism from USA Gymnastics staff, coaches, and the media. I believe that speaking out was my right. I believe that this abuse was allowed to happen because many adults at USA Gymnastics, the United States Olympic Committee, Michigan State University, and in various gyms throughout the country kept Larry Nassar secret. They failed to speak up, and they let Nassar assault children. I have numerous nieces and nephews. I could not look at them any longer and stay quiet. I knew as a former Olympian that if I spoke, people might be more likely to speak up as well. As it turned out, I was right. In the summer of 2016, I began to understand that Larry Nassar had sexually abused me and his procedures were not legitimate medical treatment. I further came to learn that he had been quietly dismissed by USA Gymnastics based upon allegations that he had sexually abused minors on our Olympic and national women's gymnastics teams. His firing was kept quiet by USA Gymnastics, and he was allowed to post messages on social media that he said he had retired. I decided to seek justice, not just for myself, but to protect others. Initially, I filed a lawsuit as a Jane Doe, but I did give an interview to the Indianapolis Star when my case was filed. Almost immediately after filing, I was bullied on social media. My name was put on various social media sites by Nassar supporters who were either told or figured out my identity. A senior USAG officials actually sent me a Facebook petition she was circulating to support Larry Nassar. Others attacked me personally, questioning my motives, my character, my morals, and even my sanity. Attorneys working for USA Gymnastics called former boyfriends and tried to dig up dirt on me, asking very personal and detailed questions about my sex life. They blamed my parents and generally attacked my character. This upset me greatly. I had done nothing wrong except speak the truth about what happened to me as a little girl. Their response was to blame the victim. USA Gymnastics put on an immediate statement about my lawsuit. They said they found out about Dr. Nassar's misconduct in 2015 and immediately contacted law enforcement. A few months later, we found out that that was a lie. USA Gymnastics has now admitted that they waited more than 5 weeks before contacting the FBI, and the FBI waited a year before contacting any of the survivors or their families. During that time, Larry Nassar went back to his clinic at MSU and continued to molest children. I began to learn that I was not alone. Almost immediately, other girls and women began to come forward with stories disturbingly similar to mine. I learned through the media that there were dozens, if not hundreds, of victims. Today, more than 250 women have already come forward in court and to law enforcement. All have told stories that are disturbingly similar to mine. Larry Nassar was convicted criminally, first on federal charges for child pornography, then on state charges for criminal sexual conduct. He has been sentenced to 300 years in prison. USA Gymnastics has also been to court attempting to dismiss claims by more than 200 women by contending that they had no legal duty to prevent Nassar's abuse or tell us that he was an abuser. I sat through the depositions of USA Gymnastics President Steve Penny and other USAG officials. I was stunned by the way their lawyers fought to prevent them from answering any meaningful questions about what they knew and when they knew it. I was disgusted by their answers when they did answer questions. Their answers were either misleading or attempted to justify their misconduct. I urge the committee to read these depositions and question Mr. Penny and other USAG officials under oath. Maybe they will answer tough questions and tell you the truth. I hope they do. This is a case of powerful people protecting other powerful people. It is up to you, as powerful members of the United States Senate, to hold them accountable, and I believe you will. Thank you for listening to all of us.
Thank you very much for your comments and your testimony. Ms. Weaver.
Good afternoon, Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I thought that training for the Olympics would be the hardest thing I would ever do. But in fact, the hardest thing I've had to do is process that I'm a victim of Larry Nassar. It's caused me to feel shame and confusion. I spent months trying to think back at my experience and wonder how I didn't know what was happening to me and how I was betrayed by Larry Nassar and everyone at USA Gymnastics and the US Olympic Committee, organizations sanctioned by the federal government whom I trusted to be on my side. I started seeing Larry Nassar at the age of 8 years old in my hometown of Lansing.
We are going to dip away from that coverage there at the Senate hearing there in D.C. We're going to take it out to Mar-a-Lago right now, where we're getting some tape playback of President Trump.
Done very well with the United States. We have a very big deficit, and we're going to weed that down, hopefully get a balance at some point in the not too distant future. But we have a massive deficit with Japan. We will, I believe, at the end of a fairly short period of time, be able to do certain things. I know they're ordering large numbers of airplanes, both jet fighters and passenger planes, and it's in the tens of billions of dollars. And they'll not only get the best plane, but will help with the process of equalization. So I think we're going to have this is a very exciting meeting for me, because I like this maybe the best. I love the world of finance and the world of economics, and probably it's where I do the best. But we will be able to work things out. I'm very happy to have Larry Kudlow with us. He's a special man. He's been a friend. I've been on this show many, many times over the years, and we've had a lot of fun together. We haven't always agreed, but I noticed lately Larry's agreeing more and more with me, which makes me quite happy. And John Bolton, John was really very much involved yesterday with our meetings on North Korea and our meetings on the military. And John, it's great to have you and Larry with us. A real honor. Thank you very much. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for being here, and your representatives. The relationship has been so good with all of us, and let's see how we do with right now the trade deficit. Thank you very much for being here. Please.
Okay, so we were listening into a little bit of there with the meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister there. This is at Mar-a-Lago there in Palm Beach, Florida there. So we'll have much more on that. meeting there tomorrow here on Fox 10 Extra. That's going to do it for us here on Fox News Now today. Thanks so much for joining us here for really top feeds and stories from across the country right here on News Now. We will see you tomorrow. I'm your host, Mike Pace. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. All right, folks, and that's going to do it here for us, the morning session here on Fox10Phoenix.com. We'll be back a little bit later to have that SpaceX launch here for you live.